Well, thank you for your interest in the ProfitSmart KPI Tracking Calculator. This is a tool that can absolutely help you really zero in on what's going on within your service department. As we say often in our Service Managers University, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so this tool will help you with that piece of the puzzle. I just wanted to give you a quick tour through it so you have a feel for how to use the tool and what it can do for you. So to start out with, everything is driven by the main menu, and you've got the icons right here. You just simply click on them. It will take you to every place that you need to go. So we do have a Getting Started icon here at the bottom, and that's really going to go through everything that I'm going to cover here in this short video. It's going to basically tell you what you need to do to set up the entire program. We'll actually walk through that here together. So as you start with the tool, the first thing you're going to do is go into the Technicians icon right over here. As I go into that icon, it's going to bring me to a screen where I can enter in up to 15 technicians. As you enter them, you're going to put in their name, you're going to put in their wage, whether you pay them hourly or annually. And if your technicians receive a lot of spiffs or bonuses throughout the year, you'd want to approximate what their annual wages are with those spiffs and add those in here as well as a salary. The software will go ahead and break that annual amount down to an hourly rate as well. And then last, there's a daily revenue goal, right? What's the total revenue we expect this technician to bring in each and every day? Now, this column is going to be calculated. However, you can change it per technician. So let's say, for example, you've got a brand new technician, and they're not really going to be performing at the levels of the rest of my team. I could lower this daily revenue goal for that particular guy. But initially, let's just leave it calculated. Now, what I'm going to do is go ahead. I've already got 2 techs entered in here. I'm going to enter in a third real quick. So I'll go down to technician number 3. We'll enter in Bill Smith here, and Bill is paid $17 an hour. We'll plug him in. Now, as I enter those in, you notice that some of the other data is already updating here. Also at the bottom, we're giving you the total number of techs that you've got entered. We're giving you the total hourly wage for your team, right? So what is it costing you in wages per hour for your entire team, as well as the average wage for the team and your highest paid technician. So once you've got your techs entered, we simply go back to the main menu, and we've got this portion handled. Next step that we want to do is go into the service department setup right here. So as we go into service department setup, there are a number of different parameters that we need to set so we know how to calculate the key performance indicators for your team. So we start out at the top. Now, if you've attended one of our Service Managers Universities, you know that we've gone through that program, and we have several worksheets that you calculated as you went through that program. These are the same worksheets that we're talking about here. We've got it labeled the exact same way. So we start out at the top. First one is your wage. Now, that number is already filled in, right? And you have your option here. By default, it's, in this particular case, showing me the average wage for my technicians. So it took the wages that I entered in under the technician setup. It's coming up with your average wage. If you would like and you prefer to, you can actually use the highest paid tech to calculate your daily revenue goals and revenue per billable hour. All you have to do is check this particular box, and it will automatically update using the highest paid tech number. Now, from there, we're going to put in what's the approximate tax and benefits, etc. For the typical technician, after analyzing hundreds and hundreds of techs across the country, it's about $4 to $5 per hour. That's covering all the additional benefits, their vacation time, holiday time, sick time, company matching taxes, all the rest of that stuff will be an additional $4 to $5 per hour. We typically use $4.50. So that'll give me my fully loaded wage. From there, underneath that, worksheet number 2 in SMU that we talk about, one of the things we question is, what is a percentage of the time that's billable? So this particular technician, we've currently got it set that my team is about 70% billable. It's not per tech, it's per team. Again, if I change that and say, okay, my tech is actually 60% billable, we can plug that number in as well. Remember that the average technician, if we're not watching it, might even be closer to 50% of their time is billable, 50% is lost time. Right underneath that, target labor to sales. If you want your service department to be really profitable, wages can't exceed 25 cents out of every revenue dollar that comes in. And that's what we're shooting for. And so this particular case, we're going to set it to 25% or saying 25 cents out of every revenue dollar coming in. Software is telling us at that point that our target labor rate needs to be about $190 per hour. Again, so after you crunch through these numbers, if your actual field rate isn't in this range, you may want to go back and take a serious look at really what you're charging per hour, and is it high enough to cover all of your cost of operation and generate a reasonable profit. Underneath there, we got a couple of other parameters that we're going to enter in, right? So that gives me my labor rate. Once we know that, we'll transfer that down here. That happens automatically. What are your average parts cost per service call and your average parts markup per service call? The national average is about $25 per hour in parts cost. Now, I know you have a lot of service calls where the parts are a lot more expensive than that. There's other calls that they're a lot less than that. The average is about $25, but you can change it if you need to. What's your average markup? So in my case, I'm using a 100% markup. That gives me 25% profit on each call as well. And then do you have a trip charge or a diagnostic fee? In my case, I've got a $79 diagnostic fee as well. What that tells me is that my revenue per billable hour target is $319.26. That's what we're shooting for. That's what I expect my technicians under this billing structure to be bringing in every single hour. Next, we go down a little bit farther, right? And I'll just scroll down on this sheet to the last couple of parameters. For demand service, that's what we're looking at right here. How many calls do my technicians make in an average day? Not the days where they're running silly and going crazy, and not the days that they're sweeping the floor for the third time yet again, right? It's just on your typical day. In my case, they're running 5 calls a day. Stretch goal. I always want to stretch my technicians a little bit. Right? I want to just make them reach just a little bit farther, and if we put that goal out in front of them, odds are they'll hit it. So I want my guys to stretch 10%, and I'm going to build that into my goals. The revenue collections percentage. I want my technicians to collect 100% of the time on residential calls. So we've got that one in. Next, first-time completion percentage, 95%. I want them to finish the call the first time they go out there, at least 95% of the time. And last is our callback percentage goal, 2.75%. Anything higher than 2.75% on callbacks is an issue that we need to deal with. Last section for setup is maintenance agreements. Average repair revenue per hour, the dollar amount in parts and pieces and add-ons and service calls per hour the technician is spending doing maintenance work. They should be able to average $40 per hour. You can change that in your particular example. If you're doing commercial, that needs to be closer to about $65 per hour. Time per maintenance call, right? So each time I go out there, how much time am I going to spend on the job in minutes? In my particular example, it's 60 minutes spring and fall, or 60 minutes per call. And then last, maintenance agreement sales goal. What percentage of the time do I want the technician to actually sell a maintenance agreement if the customer doesn't already have one? And I expect that to happen 42% of the time. Now, once we've set these parameters, we are ready to roll forward. We don't have to come back to this setup unless we want to change some of those goals that are in there. So now we're ready to use the tool itself, and all we need to do is go right here into service calls. Each day, I can go into service calls themselves, and I can enter in the parameters. You can see for each technician, it's already filled in the technician's name. And as I scroll over to the right, I'll see each of the other technicians that I have entered in my system. Each day, I'll simply enter in the parameters. How many total calls did the technician make? All right, this guy ran 5 calls today. How many of those calls were residential? In this case, they were 3, because again, remember, we're going to filter out the commercial calls on the collections piece of the puzzle. How many of those hours, or how many hours did they spend doing demand service today? So this guy spent 8 hours on those 5 calls. He had 1 call back today. He collected on 3 of those calls. Maintenance time spent 3 hours out of his day performing maintenance calls, and he actually performed 2 agreements, right? So he had 2 separate agreements that he performed those calls on. Maintenance agreement sales, he sold 1 maintenance agreement throughout his day here today. And how many opportunities did he have? 4. And the reason that's important is because, remember, we're shooting for a 42% goal on customers that did not already have an agreement with the company. If I went out on 5 service calls today and 4 of those 5 customers already had maintenance agreements, I didn't have an opportunity with the 4. All I had was 1 opportunity. So we're going to make sure that we filter that out and be fair to the technician. Next time, did he generate any sales leads? We'll put that in here. And then we start getting into some of the revenue pieces of the puzzle, right? So we start out here. What was his service revenue? Right, so actual dollars brought in on service, demand service calls. Maintenance agreement revenue, if we're charging for easy numbers, $200 a year for our maintenance agreement, and that's for 2 visits per year, every time he runs a service call, we need to credit that technician for $100 or half of that annual fee that we're charging. Even though we collected it 6 months ago, the only reason we were able to sell that maintenance agreement is because somebody was going to go out there and perform that maintenance. This guy just did that. We need to give him credit for 50% of what we collected there. And then the last item here is what was his total maintenance repair revenue. So while he was doing maintenance calls today, how much revenue did he bring in on extra parts and pieces and add-ons and things like that? Once we've entered that, we can go to the next technician. Now, again, you don't have to enter all of these things. It's just going to calculate the data for you on just the items that you enter in. Once I've got my revenue entered in, and again, I can put that in per day, per technician, from here, the software will take care of everything else. Now, this is where the fun starts to happen. I can go back now and look at my technician dashboard, and the tool will tell me by technician how they performed on each of those 9 KPIs that we're tracking in here. Right, so each of the KPIs are listed along the top. And again, you can dig in a little bit deeper or attend one of our Service Managers University to get more background on each of those KPIs. We're going to give you the goal, what we're shooting for in that category, and then how did that particular technician perform in that category. I can see here Jim Smith doesn't have any data there. He didn't run any maintenance calls. That's why we've got no data showing up. The other thing that the sheet is showing me is if the cell is coded in blue, that tells me that he met or exceeded the goal. If it's in orange, he came up a little bit short from what we were looking for. So at a glance, I can see how each of my technicians are scoring and how whether they're meeting or exceeding the goal. So I can stack them up next to each other. It gives me a real quick, easy one-page glance at my entire team. The other thing we can do is we can select any date range that we want. So if we want to look at the performance on here for a day, for a week, for a month, I just simply change the dates in here. It'll automatically update all of the information in the sheet for that particular time frame. It works really well for going back and looking at 1 week compared to a different week or 1 month compared to a different month. So that's the technician dashboard. I'm going to go back to the main menu, and we'll share with you the last dashboard, which is the company dashboard. When I click on the company dashboard, it's now going to give you a real quick look at the company, your entire service department as a whole. And how are we doing as a company? All right, so we're going to give you, again, each of those 9 KPIs. Are we meeting or exceeding as a company? Right? And then we're also going to give you a series of quick glance dials that you can look at to see how am I doing. Right, the outer ring is telling you how close are we to meeting that goal as a company, and then we'll also give you the percentage to show you how you're actually performing, and we'll do that in each of the individual categories. Again, some of them are going to be high, again, some are going to be low. Let's say callback percentage. Again, I said that goal is 2.75%, whereas a company we're at 10%. We got a little bit of, some things to work on there. All right, so we'll give you those dials. And same thing here. You can choose a date range, and you can look at the parameters for your service department for any, whether it's a day, a week, a month, going forward from there. So again, one easy tool with a lot of power in it that will actually start to show you how your team is doing and how your company is doing as a whole. Last piece I want to show you is right down here on the right-hand side. We've got all the individual calculation sheets for every one of your technicians. So if I want to look at how are we coming up with the information for revenue per billable hour, I can simply go back to that one, and it's going to start out with my first technician, and we're actually showing you the calculations for that particular technician, and I can see that for each tech as we line up here and move to the right. So you've got that information for all 9 of the KPIs that we're tracking in the ProfitSmart KPI tracking tool. If you've got any questions, reach out to us at Grandy & Associates. We'd love to help you with it. Again, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it.